Hi, this is Jillynn. I'm here with Ryan, and we're just bringing you a little Q&A about our Crossing the Threshold offering, our Expressive Arts Wilderness Rite of Passage ceremony, and wanted to just go over some things, try and answer some questions for anybody who has some curiosity about our offering. Ryan, what's going on with you lately? What's emerging over in your neck of the woods?
Today was a fantastic day. I started by drumming up the sun at a place nearby my house because it had been raining for so long. And so I was really excited to welcome the sun back and take a walk and see what is actually emerging. And one of those things are butterflies, which I was really happy to see. And so it's really, I know the equinox was on Thursday, but for me, it kind of had the vibe today. So that's me today. How about you? What's your landscape like on your end?
Yeah, that sounds beautiful, Ryan. Well, I don't have the sun. It is quite cloudy and a bit rainy here. But just I think I told you just in the last week or so, my owl, my Western screech owl that makes a home and raises babies in the oak tree out front of my house every year, is back. So I generally that's my first part of my morning is a walkabout out into my yard at dusk or dawn. um, to say hello to the mama owl, and she's always standing her perch at the entrance of the hole in the tree. Um, yeah, and then my kittens follow me around the yard as I say hello to all the buds that are emerging. Lots of daffodils and crocus right now, which is a reminder that it's coming. The sun will be here. It'll make its way up the coast.
That's right. That's so sweet about your owl. When I saw the picture, I was like, oh my gosh, that is so cute. You can barely see it if you didn't know it was there, but it sounds like you've cultivated a beautiful relationship with them.
Yeah, she's really a guide for me. So I am appreciative every year when she comes back and our rhythms get to play out uh, collaboratively in connection.
Yeah. So thought maybe we'd
Hmm.
start off by just giving folks a little bit of, you know, uh, dip our toes into our own orientation and how we came to this work. And people will start to get a flavor there. And then we'll go into some more detail about practicalities and other things.
That sounds good. Do you want to talk about how you came to this work, or I could jump
Sure.
in either way?
It's funny. So 8 years ago, coming on eight, I was doing the Earth Body Institute certification for ecotherapy, a training. And one of the cohort, who's still a really good friend of mine, asked me, "Hey, do you know about this like going out on the land and in ceremony, this rite of passage work?" And I'm like, "Huh. Well, I kind of know it conceptually. I know like cultures have had that." But she's like, "Well, have you heard of School of Lost Borders?" And she's like, look it up when you get home. So I looked it up, and I was at a moment in my life where it just felt right. There was like a transitioning happening in my own life, and there was just something calling me to I didn't know what I was getting into, but I showed up months later and had a profound and beautiful and connective, and also, uh, you know, in many ways just cracking open type of experience that to this day, I think I'm still on the journey of integrating that and embodying some of those lessons. So that was my introduction, and I became so enamored with the ceremony and so much I've seen it work its magic with myself as well as the people in the group, that I have huge trust in the ceremony, and I wanted to bring elements of wilderness rite of passage in lots of different things that I do. So here we are many years later, and co-creating this program that has a lot has that as an element as well as additional elements. So that's a little bit of the rite of passage part of things. How about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say what a gift. I mean, so grateful that you ended up on that path because it's part of why I ended up on this path as well. But my background is as a therapist, and so I was working for years with fairly impacted adolescents in a school setting where so much of what we were trying to do to support teens was um, just awfully steeped in workbooks and lectures. And I felt like it was so the antithesis of how I wanted to be offering care to people,
Hmm.
that I proposed uh, running a different kind of group where I would bring kids out into nature and use my art therapy background and fuse that into our nature excursions. So I started doing these eco art therapy groups, I don't know, about 15 years ago with teens, as a way to really let the unfolding happen for each of them as individuals in connection with nature and through the expressive arts. Um, and and in that way, I mean, it was so clear, like they didn't need a workbook to tell them how to understand themselves. They needed time to
Mhm.
listen, to slow down, to disconnect from their phones, to be in community. And it was such a powerful experience that is when I think I um, connected with the Earth Body Institute and started doing some training, and then uh, gratefully met you. Um, and a wilderness rite of passage, like the solo experience, I'd always been something I'd been interested in, and I had felt too intimidated to pursue until you and I connected, and I developed some pretty deep trust with you. And then you were able to support me in experiencing my own um, rite of passage ceremony. And as you know, that profoundly impacted the course of my life, the work that I do today, how I show up with clients, with family, with friends, myself. So yeah, it's I too deeply respect the ceremony and all that can unfold when we slow down to really listen um, to ourselves
Mm.
within the greater collective.
Mm. I'm just taking that in and also practicing what that
Yeah,
is. I love you. Well, first of all, kudos for listening to your own calling and realizing that these kids had needed something different than that was being offered to them, and you were being called to a more, sounds like a more holistic and um, more honoring way of holding their whole being. And this piece around
yeah,
slowing down and listening is one of the reasons why this particular kind of container um, is perfect because it is it's one of the modalities or frameworks or containers that can actually really support that because you are given the gift of listening should you take it. Once you cross the threshold, you as uh, I think this is a line from David White's that I've used a lot, where you can have that deepest conversation possible with the world and yourself and all the parts of yourself.
yeah,
And that's something that our modern world does not give lots of opportunities for. And so, because of that spaciousness, it seems that something different can happen there. Like there's space for possibility of seeing differently, listening differently, and being differently. Um, and as one of many, magics of the ceremony. And I thought,
yeah. I do
go ahead.
you want to go ahead? Oh, well, I was just gonna like add on to what you were saying about um, how this kind of offering, like stepping away from all of the things that distract us, right? Our phones, all the ways that we sort of numb to soothe, um, uh, and stepping away from all of that really does give you a chance to drop in, and it can be uncomfortable uh, to to strip away some of those layers, um, but it is in that stripping away, right? That uh, and and the shedding off of that something new is born, and I think that is what it can be so powerful, and it can be intimidating, and I think being held in community as part of that process is what I think makes the experience so um, transformative. Um, to be fully with yourself and also fully held and witnessed in it.
Yeah, yeah. A huge part of this of the magic is the fact that it's not just you going out on the land, we call it a solo, but it's that everybody else is listening to each other. Call them sacred stories, right?
Yes.
Or your intentions. When you arrive on the land, well, in one version, you arrive on the land and you've got like 12 people who don't really know each other that well, sometimes. By the end of that day, you have like even the first day, you've started to uh, peel off those layers and get to some of those sacred stories. And uh, coming back in from the solo to that, similarly, you're not just going out and having an experience and then going back to your life. There's this mediating uh, cauldron of magic, which is other people's deep whale ear listening. And this is, I use the word, you brought in deep listening, and I just want to bring in one of my guides, uh, Larry Hobbs, who was a marine biologist and he passed in the fall. But he would always bring a whale ear bone to put on the altar as a reminder. And I'm sure it had lots of meanings for him. But one of the meanings for him and all of us was like, we're here to do something to gift each other and ourselves the deepest presence and listening that we can bring to each other.
Mm, I love that. I love that symbolism. Mm. And I think it is where we've gotten away from as a collective and where we're being called back to at this sort of threshold in society right now is how do we really truly connect with one another? How do we truly really hold each other's stories and learn to listen, especially across differences? Um, it's it's why I feel so passionate about our offering. I mean, I feel passionate about it, last year, this year, whatever, but especially at this moment uh, in time, it just feels particularly needed.
Yeah, so with that, you kind of opened the door to this sort of next kind of inquiry here is like why this particular program in the way that we are creating it, crossing the threshold. Because it is a little different than some of the bare bones wilderness rite of passage. So we've got the days on the land as the wilderness rite of passage, and we have this other component to it that helps lead us into that. So maybe we can both speak to like why this particular container at this time.
Um, yeah, I mean, I do think it, right? It, we sort of said this already, but the stripping away of the layers of the social conditioning of the paradigms, the oppressive paradigms that we have been raised in, conditioned to believe, that can be so hurtful and harmful to so many. I think to start to um, uh, deconstruct or compost some of those beliefs, you really do need time to step back in quiet and get clear about what is truly yours and what is was just sort of part of what you were steeping in. And I think as we move forward and as things become more destabilized, feeling really embodied and grounded in one's own truth, um, and what are our own gifts to bring to the collective is essential.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big piece of why now, why right now at this time.
Right on. Yeah. Yep. I'm glad we're doing this together because that's exactly how I hold it. And that, you know, on a collective level, we're crossing that threshold as well. And, we've all heard various phrases or ways of naming that. I think it can be really useful to name it. One of those is the Great Turning. Many of you may have heard that
Hmm.
term. Uh, Resma calls it the squeeze, it's both the great unraveling as well as the great remembering. It's all of those things. But what I appreciate about the structure of a wilderness rite of passage, and we've been kind of talking about it, but to be more explicit, there's a severance piece. What needs to die? What is, like you said, is oppressive and
Yes.
harmful, both in our own lives and as the collective. And that's a really important step not to pass over. Certain things need to intentionally be let go of. Actually, things do need to die. This is what nature teaches us every season. There's a turning there. Second, crossing the threshold with intention. And so, what I like about what we're creating is like we're naming each in our own lives. We have those things that we need to do that with, and then as a collective, we can actually face the trouble, capital T, together, and say we're crossing this threshold and we're going to be with it. And then the third stage, which we can talk more about later, but simply is called the incorporation stage. It's the return. So after we've crossed the threshold, after certain listenings, after certain stories, after certain experiences, and none of which we can really plan in advance because there's a mystery component to it. But when we return, the word incorporation has within it the word corp, as in body. So, how are we going to bring the wisdoms, the listenings, the medicines, the gifts uh, into it? How are we going to embody that in our lives, in our context where we are at? And it's also one reason, just on a practical level, why Jillynn and I, we want to have a post ceremony gathering, like online gathering as well, to help in that process of bringing all this forward and not leaving it just on the land. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for outlining all of that, Ryan. Um, because each one of those is a very essential step in this process. Um, and again, doing it for ourselves individually, getting clear about it, but then also being witnessed in it, I think is um, a big piece of it, uh, especially the post on the land incorporation part.
Yeah.
Um, I know for me in my own experience with ceremony, that was almost as big as the nights out solo. Um, that coming back and staying awake to what unfolded, awake to what I learned,
Mm.
awake to the lessons.
And it's not a one and done, right? That's a
Yeah.
a continual iteration over
Right.
over time. And but it's useful to name those things. I was gonna oh yeah, I was just gonna bring in one more thing. Yeah, I mean, imagine a world. where everybody becomes so deeply who they are and how they are, who they are meant to become, that they are embodying their gifts in their particular, I call it the ecosystem of repair or the ecosystem of healing, and they're inhabiting that niche. Um, what a different world we would have. So, I see ceremony as
Yeah.
one way to get more clarity, confidence, and passion around those aspects of becoming more deeply who we are and embodying our gifts in the world, because we need you, we need us, we need everybody doing that to the best of their capacity.
Right. And I want to use what you just said to launch into why I think for us incorporating the expressive arts is such an important and unique component of what we're offering, because there is a way when you're engaged in art that you're moving beyond the verbal, the cognitive, and you're really integrating the deeper levels. Um, and to be able to um, and for us to be working specifically with the elements as part of our expressive arts, um, to really be moving beyond thinking, which is where a lot of us get stuck. Well, we have a lot of good intentions, we have a lot of insight, but it gets hard to put it into action. It gets hard to embody the new lessons, new learning, new ways of being. But when you start to express it through art, and again, you don't have to be an artist, um, like you don't have to be able to make beautiful things, but to just use different ways of creativity to um, feel into, express, share, embody the lessons that you're learning, the gifts that you are realizing, um, is a way to incorporate, integrate on such a deeper level. And so I love that we will be offering that in uh, the four meetings leading up to the on the land, but also on the land and also as part of integration
Yep.
with practices that people can then continue to use in their life as they, you know, carry it forward. Keep waking up to themselves.
Ooh, I like that. Keep waking up to themselves. Um, Thank you for kind of like outlining the expressive arts piece, and I wonder if I could follow up with that, because
Mhm.
I'm trying to like put myself in the seat of someone maybe newer to that piece of it as well, and I count myself as,
Sure. Yeah.
not too long ago, new to expressing through arts, various arts, and we assume you mean not just painting, like the just phenomenal piece of art you have in the background there, but we're talking all in any of the arts, right? And we'll be using some tools, but
Yes.
it's really broadly defined, I think. And uh, yeah, I just was gonna say, if you said, and you don't have to be an artist, and I think it's a both and, right? It's like showing up to for
Well,
example, yeah, go ahead. I,
I was gonna say, like, artists as like, you know,
yeah,
people get locked into believing what art is versus we are all artists just
exactly. Yeah,
because
yeah.
if we're expressing ourselves in creative ways. Yeah.
Yep. That's where I was
Yeah.
going with that is and I love your point about bypassing the the noggin, because there's so much wisdom in our being on all these different, however you think of that. There's so much more
Hmm.
ways of being and access to wisdoms that aren't conceptual, that aren't an agenda item, and that can come out. One of the things that I've learned through expressive arts is, and one of mine is poetry and writing, but it surprises me, and I can actually, there's something that comes out in a painting or music or writing, and if I'm surprised, it's like, oh, that's something in me as well as beyond me, and I can use that as a mirror uh, to learn more deeply about the world and myself.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really appreciate about making art in connection with the more than human world, right? Like using nature materials as part of the art medium, is it isn't like it takes us out of these preconceived ideas about what we're going to create and it puts us more in process.
Mm,
And then through process, I think is where we get to parts of ourselves we didn't know were there or things we needed to see that we weren't, you know, we wouldn't have seen if we were, going to make the idea, the image that we already had preconceived in our head. Um, I had a really powerful experience when we were in the desert with mud and just painting my body. And um, a layer for me emerged that I wouldn't have happened if I didn't decide in that moment I'm going to start to paint myself
mhm,
with this mud. But um, the mud was a great lesson for me in the ways that things um, can dry and crack and shed away that I needed to know in that moment that
mm,
wouldn't have happened had I not chosen to engage in that way.
mm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, that's one of those conversations that you had that you wouldn't have planned in advance. It just happens emergently and
Yeah.
organically on the land. And can, maybe we should start to turn towards practicalities, but I wanted to follow up. Just if you
Hmm.
could give us, that's a great example for the on the land piece. Could you give us an example of something we might do in the lead up gatherings with regard to nature and elements and expressive arts? And I can as well, but I'd love an example.
Yeah. Sure. I like working with water from local watersheds or your local land. Could even be dewdrops on, the plants in front of your house in the morning, and watercolors, and letting the water tell you what
Mm,
wants to come through. Not your mind, not your hand, but like let the water choose the colors. Let the water choose the broad strokes or the saturation of the paint. And it doesn't even have to be with paint. It could just be the water in dirt or the water on sidewalk. Um, but it is a way that you start to build relationship with the elements, that you start to listen beyond yourself.
mhm,
Um, and I think that takes practice. Um, and it can feel a little, if you're not used to it, if you're not, that's not a lens that you've been coming from necessarily, it can feel maybe a little silly at first or a little like, am I really listening to something beyond me? Um, but the more that you do it, the more you'll find that you're getting insights or perspectives that you weren't getting or you wouldn't have gotten just on your own with your own paintbrush and water from the tap.
mm, mhm. Yeah, I love it because you are describing like I was going to say everything, but every who in the world has their own agency, including water. And it is that coming together now in this moment, and then coming together now in this moment, and then coming together now in this moment. And what is the conversation that is wanting to happen? Um, can be and that's really isn't that the heart of ecotherapy? That's the heart of dream work. That's the heart of any modality, I believe, that gets us deeper into the world, that wants us to be in the web of life. And, you know,
Yeah.
well,
Hmm.
Jillynn, gosh, we could probably jam for hours and hours on that, on all of these things. And I'm wondering if we want to,
Yeah, I was gonna say we should probably some practical.
yeah, do you, uh, I can, or we can just kind of go through what are the main what's the main structure of what's
Right. So
involved here.
yeah, so yeah, the program involves four sort of preparation sessions. It's um, you know, first and foremost, building a safe container for deep exploration and community with one another. So getting to know the people in your cohort, building some sacred space and time with each other. Within those four sessions leading up to the on the land time. Certainly, some knowledge around the practical skills for being on the land and being out in the solo experience. Talking about the elements that we might be navigating, the materials we'll need, the supplies, etc. Um, each of those four meetings will have a connection to one of the four elements and an expressive arts offering that can be a practice between each meeting, and then reflect on the practice when we meet up again. Um, and then really, some of there's the physical preparation, but then there's the emotional preparation to prepare yourself to mentally be out on the land, to shed layers, to step into that greatest conversation that one can have with themselves. Um, and Ryan, you already, if you want to you could recap just quickly, but you already sort of spoke to the stages of on the land, but maybe you just want to say it again.
Yeah. Thank you for that overview of the online portion, the 4 2-hour meetings. I will throw one more thing into that, and that is, as we say in the wilderness rite of passage world, as soon as we decide we're going to, as soon as we say yes, our psyches know
Mm,
this,
yeah.
and we're already kind of in ceremony in a certain way. Like in my experience, something happens where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and then I, I guess what I wanted to, yeah, throw in the cauldron there was we want to, support the clarifying of those intentions and the things that are alive for us in this moment in our life. And of course, from the time we start our online, I think beginning of May, to the time on the land, which is the end of the following months, it's only that's only 2 months or so. But, you know, life has a way of initiating us over and over, and, life shape shifts. All to say that we will be, playing and working with, and you'll be doing, expressive arts, etc., to, refine our intentions and becoming clear about what actually is calling us forward, what actually is, alive in us. And then, of course, when we get to the land, there's going to be another round of that because there's something about being there together, sitting around in a circle, sharing parts of our story that maybe the online format doesn't, get to, where it might, open up additional layers even to ourselves. So yeah, just to throw that in there. Um, yeah, just a overview of on the land. We arrive, we're going to, get settled in. We're going to ask people to, find their solo spot. Is this the part where I can just say some practicalities about that? Or do you, or just,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So, we'll have a
No,
base.
go for it.
Yeah, we'll have a base camp, and people will find their sacred solo spot, and that will be within a specific diameter or uh you know spacing from the base camp, and then you'll come back, and we'll have a is it a day or two? I can't remember exactly, but we'll have the time to
Mm-hmm.
drop in together, uh refine some of our intentions, and then the is it the third morning, um, we bless you over the threshold,
Mm-hmm.
and you will have uh, a day and a night and a day and a night on the land in ceremony. And part of that is that can go, any number of ways. It looks like how your ceremony. There's no right way for a ceremony to go. But as part of the preparation, we'll also talk about things like self-generated ceremony, which are just, different rituals and different practices that might support uh, tuning into one thing or another. Let's say life is calling you to let go of some certain things. There might be some specific ritual things that help with that, or if life maybe wanting a celebration or an honoring. So there are different ways that can look like. And some of these you can kind of have in your toolbox going out, and some will just you'll be I think a lot of people are surprised how much ritual intelligence comes out naturally. Um, I'm someone, just as an example, I'm someone who doesn't come from a religious background, a sacred tradition, ritual tradition in any way, shape, or form. And yet, um, there's something about human beings that for 100,000 years, we've sat around fires. We've had rites of passage. We've marked transitions in our life in community. So it's in us. And you'll be in conversation with the land and how that will come out. So at the end of so the morning of the fourth or whatever day that is, fifth day, uh just 2 nights out solo, you'll come back, we'll greet you with love and smiles from your experience out on the land, and we'll have a day of uh coming back into our bodies, kind of getting grounded. We'll feed you, and then there'll be the process of uh getting gathering in circle and telling our story. And we give some spaciousness to that for each person to say what happened, what was your conversation, what was your ceremony. And that's one of the most beautiful parts of the whole experience, because your sacred story is your sacred story, but we're catching it. We're all catching it together, and we're mirroring back as guides parts of those stories. This piece, it's hard to put into words, until you've experienced it. And then there'll be an incorporation council, that piece about how do we come back and bring this stuff back? How do we go back to a world that doesn't quite understand the experience? How do we go back to a world that says, "Hey, how was your camping trip?" Or, that sort of thing. And then, helping to put supports into place to keep parts of that sacred, but also, uh, y you know, as you so beautifully put it, Jillynn, keep waking up in our lives over and over and over again. I think that's some of it. And then there's pieces around
Yeah.
the fasting. Maybe I'll throw that back at you. I can always talk about fasting, but I want us to get clear
Yeah.
what we mean by that.
Well, I also,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I also don't want you to miss that there is gonna be celebration. We will have a forest party and, you
The
know, a
dancing.
lot of
Mhm.
a lot of joy, as part of that. Yeah, more movement. Fasting. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to fast, and we'll invite each participant. It will be an individual decision, and we're, um, available to support, coming to that decision based on what is good and right for each person. But there's, the potential to fast from food, the potential to fast from shelter, um, the potential to fast from distractions. So, technology, or for me, in my ceremony, I chose not to bring any art supplies because I can use art as a distraction. I ended up making art with the land anyway, but that felt part of the ceremony, um, versus a way to, soothe and distract myself versus staying present with the feelings that were coming up. So there's a lot of options, and again, it really is an individual decision. There's no wrong way to do it. Ryan always has a great story about a particular woman who, what she needed was a lot of comfort for her ceremony, and so she had all the comfort items, and that was what was good and right for her. And I was I had a lot of stuff too when I first showed up at ceremony, and I was able to get to my growth edge with, what was the right amount of, stripping away and fasting for me.
Yeah.
Um, Anything you need to add to that, Ryan?
That was beautiful. I love the piece. I love all of that. The only thing I will add is uh, that the phrase, yeah, the growing edge is the perfect place to be. Like, where's the juice? This is not about uh, going hard. This is not about being the toughest person out there. The way I hold it is what is going to support the growing edge for what is alive and wanting to be in the world. So, um, and then with regard to the fasting, again, what kind of fasting actually supports that? I hold fasting as an emptying
Hmm.
out, broadly conceived, emptying out the filling that we do all the time in our lives so that something new might enter our being or our listening or our hearts.
Yeah.
That's how I hold it. So that could be food. Uh, and there's other reasons for that, but um, yeah, so we'll be talking about all this stuff.
Yeah. And then just in terms of some practicalities, like what will be included when you're on the land, we'll invite people to bring snacks and food to share, but we will be making several of the meals. We'll have drums and rattles for people to use. Definitely there'll be some art supplies. We'll be handling all first aid, and have safety kits and air horns and things that people need in case of emergency. We'll also have a satellite phone because we may be out pretty far. Um, Without cellular connection. Definitely music and dancing. And then always available is the one on one support from guides for whatever is emerging for people. Um, you know, that will always be available. And people do the solo journey, but again, on their growth edge. So sometimes people need to come back and check in before they can go back out and continue their solo experience. There's really no wrong way to be on your growth edge. And we don't want people in a place of distress or enduring, but just right up to the edge of comfort, discomfort. And I would trust that everyone will know what's right for them, and we'll be having lots of conversations about that leading up to the time on the land. Um, I know I've had a lot of people ask me when they see the offering, do I have to have experience with dispersed camping? And like, I don't know what it means to sleep without shelter. And we will be offering a lot of that guidance as part of the preparation and on the land as well. Um,
Yeah.
And then I think the other important details, size group, we're looking to keep it intimate. We're dropping into sacred space with one another. And so we wouldn't want it much larger than 10 people. So somewhere between 4 and 10 is a nice intimate size. All genders are welcome. And then, uh, because this is an experience that can elicit, can be very evocative, can elicit a lot of big emotions. We will, check in with everybody and just make sure there's a goodness of fit, um, given the kind of solo experience and the emotions that can come up. So, anybody who's had some, pretty significant mental health challenges in the last 6 months to a year, we'd want to, talk more directly to, or any we don't want anyone withdrawing from substances during this time, um, or anything that might put them physically at risk. So all of those conversations we'll have as part of the registering for the offering. Um, and then Ryan, I don't know if you want to talk about like plans and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But before I do, I forgot to mention one important and awesome thing about being on the solo part, the 2 day solo, is that you will have a buddy. So we call them stone buddies,
Yeah.
or some other. There's a method where daily you will non-verbally um, check in with your buddy. In one way to do that is we stack rocks. So someone in the morning puts a rock, someone in the afternoon puts a rock, and they go back to their solo spot, etc. And you do that for the 2 days. And that is important for two reasons. One, just like, hey, safety, like I'm here, I'm okay. And two, um, it's practice that we're not going out just for ourselves. We're going out to be part
Hmm.
of the web of life, to take care of one another. And that's the type of culture that we want to build on a larger scale, of course, as well. So, in case, yeah, I forgot to mention that earlier. But yeah, in terms of, like
Yeah.
practical money stuff, yeah, we have different if the financial piece is like, you know, big for you, let's have a conversation. We're prioritizing, scholarships for Black, Indigenous, and people of color and LGBTQ. And we also have payment plans. So the payment plans can be really supportive of, can be 1 month, 2 month, or yeah, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, what we'll work with you there. Just ping us and let us know. Um, let's have a conversation because the it's not about the money, it's like how can we support more of this work in the world?
Yeah. Very much so. Thank you, Ryan. And in terms of practicality, our first online meeting I think is May 5th. So we're asking people to register um, ideally by April 21st. There's sort of an intention letter that we ask everyone to write, and when you register, you'll get some guidance around that. And so April 21st gives us time to read all of those letters and to begin to um, really hold the group, the energetic of the group, and to begin to, um, sort of curate or consider what we're offering each week in the context of what everyone is bringing, what's emerging in the collective.
Very
Mm.
good. Awesome.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm so
I
looking
know.
forward to this. Yeah.
I'm getting amped up already for like there's nothing like the being on the land together like that, and the fact that we're putting this front piece on it. We're going to arrive on the land already having somewhat of a cohesive group, and makes it all the more beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have any questions, reach out to us.
Yeah.
Happy to have one-on-one or one-on-two conversation with folks. Also, I just want to throw this out here because
Yeah.
I think it came up last time. If you know people from your area that, like a friend or someone, adjacent to this kind of work and um to do it together. I've been thinking about this more, sort of a tangent, but not really, because as we go back into our lives, having those people who've gone through that experience and then being local to where we're at, can be extremely powerful and supportive, as well as like helping to build the culture that a lot of us are longing for. So just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, look forward to hearing some of you and seeing you on the land.
See you on the land.
Be well.